Careful, Harry. It will cost you. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. This sentence, careful, Harry, it will cost you, could be applicable to so much in relation to the life of the Prince of Pink Pancakes. After all, here was a man who was born into the royal family, and that meant that he never had to be concerned about the issue of money, nor in relation to having a place to live. He didn't really need a proper job, because the monarchy would always ensure that he was provided for, and what he had to do in return was exhibit service, pursue charitable ideals, open things, make a few speeches, behave himself. Relieved of the burden of being the direct heir, he was given a greater degree of latitude, and in some respects this would place him in an ideal position. All of the privilege without the burden of expectation. Growing up with all of this has meant that he's never really had a proper job. And then, as a consequence of his own arrogance, allied with the sickly sweet promise of future faking provided by his narcissist wife, he was convinced that the two of them could make a dash across the ocean, stopping off in Canada and ending up in California, and that they would be set for life, monetizing their status as the renegade royals, and that they would be welcomed with open arms by the celebrity set, and all would be well. Fast forward 5 years, and they find themselves in a situation of repeated ridicule, with many people no longer wanting to fraternize with them, the deals having dried up to a large extent, overheads remaining high with regard to mortgage costs, security, PR, and general day-to-day expenses. This one's wife, with repeated flops in respect of content creation, her supposed as-ever lifestyle empire, and Harry. What is he doing? Well, he purportedly has a role as the chimp officer at Better Up, but that's not going to bring in the level of money that is required. And we've noticed now that he started hawking himself around as a renter prince. After all, his appearance in Ontario talking to a number of real estate agents is not exactly something for which he was well known in the past, and is evidence of the fact that he took the gig as a consequence of the need for money. It might possibly have been simple greed, but one suspects it's more out of necessity, given the combination of reduced opportunities for the Sussexes combined with the maintenance of high overheads. And it would appear that yet more financial trouble could be on the horizon for Harry, as reported by Robert Mendick in The Telegraph, whereby the Duke of Sussex and 6 other high-profile figures involved in a £38 million privacy case have been warned about the consequences of the cost of their legal action. In a ruling on Tuesday, 2 judges said the claimants, among them Prince Harry, needed to have the clearest possible understanding of how the case was being conducted in the face of spiralling legal fees. It raised the prospect of the 7 claimants suing the publishers of the Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday being landed with a multi-million-pound costs bill should they all lose. It's ordinarily the case that in the United Kingdom that if you are successful in your case, either as claimant or defendant, the losing party, save in exceptional circumstances, pays a proportion of your costs, usually around about 60 to 70%. It can be more, it can be less, but that's generally speaking the amount. And where you have got an action as expenses of this, then that mounts up to a lot of money. However, there is an increased risk for Harry, Because whilst there are 7 claimants who are all using the same solicitors and barristers, facing off against the publishers of the Daily Mail, utilising their solicitors and barristers, the judge has pointed out that if only some win, then those who lose will be left with a much larger and potentially crippling debt burden. In the judgment, Judge David Cook and Mr. Justice Nicklin said they wanted to make it clear to the claimants that they risked paying substantial costs in the event of a legal defeat. The court had been told that the 7 claimants were insured collectively for £14.1 million to meet the totality of Associated Newspapers' costs in the event that they all lost. Thus, Harry and his co-claimants have gone off and gained something called after-the-event insurance, which means that if they lose, the insurer will pay out and they don't have to. However, the claimants have obtained individual policies, each worth £2.35 million. Thus, if it transpires that, for example, 3 of the claimants drop out or they succeed, but the other 4 lose, or they're the only remaining claimants that are in and they lose, then that cost burden isn't spread across 7, it's across 4 people. And that would mean that their exposure would be beyond that of their insurance policy. In short, Harry potentially could find himself on the receiving end of a much larger claim for the payment of costs. In their ruling, the judges said, in our judgment, it is imperative that the parties, and in particular the individual claimants, have the clearest possible understanding as to the consequences of the way in which this litigation is being conducted. If that means the individual claimants need to reassess their after-the-event insurance cover, then that can only be in their best interests. It is particularly important that this issue is addressed at this point, as substantial costs have already been incurred, and the parties will soon be incurring more substantial costs in preparation for the trial next year. Indeed, the trial is estimated to last some 9 weeks, starting in mid-January, and it's invariably the case that the costs of trial often far outweigh, dependent of course on the length of trial, but far outweigh the interlocutory stage, by virtue of the fact that you're in court every day with a cohort of solicitors and barristers, brief fees incurred, daily refreshers and the like. In a previous ruling, the judges had said the estimated £38.8 million costs of the case were clearly outside the range of the reasonable, and that such sums were manifestly excessive and therefore disproportionate. Harry's got a warning, and one wonders also if this is a pair of judges that are actually inadvertently or obliquely hinting at the weakness of the claimant's case to suggest you might want to consider your potential exposure in light of these mounting costs and the possibility that you are going to lose. Whilst, of course, they haven't seen all of the evidence, they'll have seen some of it, and also the nature of the pleadings. And it might just be that they're signalling, we don't think that you're necessarily going to win, and therefore you're going to be subjected to some hefty costs in the event of defeat, particularly if some of the claimants succeed or they drop out, leaving a smaller number to share the costs burden. And if that includes Harry, and there's a possibility it might not include him, but if it does, the fact that he's going to have to fork out yet more money on top of the existing court fees and costs that he's been ordered to pay, well, it's certainly not going to go down well with his handler, is it? Because, as you know, as a somatic narcissist, money's hugely important to her, and at a time when Harry isn't really bringing much in, but appears to be hemorrhaging money on court activity, well, it's certainly going to result in those pink pods getting tasered. It remains to be seen what will happen with this court case, but an early warning from the judges that it may well be particularly costly to Harry. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.